If you look back, we know some of the bigger civilizations like, the Roman Empire, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, etc. But if you actually look deeper into those time periods, there are many city-state empires, which would be the ancient equivalent of a micro-empire, that had such a huge influence, yet they were very small in geographical size.
Hello, everyone. It's me, Emily Bron, and today I have pleasure to meet my old, can I say friend, or amigo, George Siosi. George and our story of meeting each other, can be told after then, but I know George for around 3 years, I believe. Meaning we met online 3 years ago, being at some online digital nomad forum. And after that, I immediately signed to George. It was LinkedIn profile and the newsletters and all what I can find about George. And today, after all these years, we again together in my studio, not in real life. I hope it will be someday. But I have pleasure to meet and introduce you, dear friends, George Siosi Samuels. And it's enough for me to speak. George, please in short tell your amazing and inspiring for me, and I believe for many others, a personal story.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. And in terms of my story, like with anybody's story, trying to summarize. For me, I'm 37 now, so summarizing a 37-year story isn't always easy, but I can give, the shortened version, or I'll do my best. So I was born in Fiji. I am an Australian citizen. I grew up in Asia Pacific and went to an international school in Bangladesh for most of my formative years. It was an American international school, so that's where the Americanized accent comes from, but I never lived in the US. And then I returned to Australia for university. And I stayed in Australia for about a decade. Crazy to think now. So from 20 to 30, I was in Australia. And then after that, I moved to Singapore, which is where I set up my first company and then also a second startup. And now I find myself in Mexico. And so I have been exposed to a lot of different cultures. I am very passionate about entrepreneurs and especially the smaller scale businesses. I think we're at a time where emerging technologies are enabling more of the smaller players to be able to do more with less. And I'm very passionate about the intersection of community, culture, and technology. Hence my nickname at this point in time as the Digital Wayfinder.
It's very exciting. Who gets this nickname? Yourself?
Well, actually, it came from my fiance. So Polynesian wayfinding is its own term and concept. It has to do with navigating the ocean, using wayfinding techniques, right, from the ancient Polynesians. And the digital aspects, that just comes from my career in tech. And so my fiance was the one who helped put those two words together. And I thought it was cool. So I stuck with it.
So your fiance is American or Mexican?
No, she's mixed. She's mixed like I am. So there's this term called third cultured kids. So I don't know if you've ever heard of it before. Yep. So TCKs, right? Third culture kids. So she is Panamanian Mexican and American Irish.
I see. So Mexico became kind of ideal place for both of you to find each other and live in. And can I ask why Mexico?
Well, for love. So during the pandemic, I actually came here. So we first met in London and then ended up doing a long distance relationship. And I was in Singapore at the time, of course, during the pandemic, didn't know when the pandemic was going to end. And I heard that Mexico was one of the few places in the world that was still open, to people coming in. And so she had traveled to Mexico to be with her parents. And I thought, well, why not? We don't know when the pandemic will end. So I took a risk and hopped on a flight during the pandemic from Singapore to Mexico and ended up here. Didn't expect to stay or I guess I didn't expect things to turn out the way that they have, but I'm glad that they have. Things have worked out very well, and went from just being girlfriend and boyfriend to now engaged.
Okay, my congratulations. So, do you see your future connected with Mexico? Like, I understand that you expat in Mexico now, and it's hard today to plan for all life, but at least for the next couple of years, where do you see yourself?
Yeah, definitely for the next couple of years, I still see myself here in Mexico. As TCKs, we're often, traveling around a lot. So we never really say that we settle anywhere. But in terms of, having a solid home base for the two of us, this is definitely a solid home base for us. And then we've definitely fallen in love with Mexico.
So, from what place you're speaking with me now? Oaxaca, or where you located actually?
Yes, in Oaxaca.
Okay, okay. It's on my list to visit. I visited almost all big cities of Mexico, but Oaxaca, it's for this year.
It's beautiful.
Yes, I know that it's beautiful and it's special. And my next question will be about terms that I get only reading your posts and newsletters. Such new terms for me, and I believe for others, as micropreneurship and micropreneur or micro empires. And my kind of following question, how it's different from solopreneur. Like, for example, I consider myself solopreneur, and there are many other solopreneurs. What is the difference, and what is the kind of new aspect that micropreneurship bring to the business,
Yeah, great question. So a micropreneur essentially is the sort of the next stage for a solopreneur. With all of these terms like solopreneur, micropreneur, etc., essentially they're all entrepreneurs, but at different stages, right? The micropreneur actually, by definition, often has a micro business. And a micro business is typically any business earning revenue with a team of less than 5 or 10. And the reason why I say 5 or 10 is because it depends on which country you're in, because there's different, laws or jurisdictions around the definitions. So the safe bet is to say if you have less than 10 people in your team, then typically you are a micropreneur. So you can actually be a micropreneur even if you are a solopreneur, right? Because you have less than 10 people in your team. However, I think for solopreneurship, a lot of people think that as a solopreneur, you might be doing everything yourself and not actually getting help. And I think it's interesting to take note of that many solopreneurs are still getting help, whether that's through a VA, might be a partner or a spouse, right? So I think sometimes there's a little bit of I don't know if it's deceiving or deception, but I think people get a bit confused into what it means to be a solopreneur because you might still be getting help. And so micropreneurship, I think, is becoming a little bit more popular because it's a little bit more honest in its description. Because micropreneur is saying that, like, okay, yes, you might be the only one employed in your business, but you're still getting help from other people. And, it can be up to 10 people. Now, why that's relevant today is because I think more businesses are able to actually earn way more revenue with smaller teams. And Sam Altman, who is one of the co-founders for OpenAI, ChatGPT, which has become very popular, he's also stated that he's expecting, the first billion-dollar one-person company to come out soon. But if it's not one person, it's definitely going to be these small teams that are going to have outsized returns. And that leads into micro empires. So I became really fascinated by the concept of a micro empire because there's actually a lot of examples of micro empires that exist today and also in ancient times. In ancient times, they would have been referred to more as, city-states, because the concept of a nation didn't even exist back in the day. So the world consisted of a lot of, smaller empires or smaller city-state-based empires. And if you look back, we know some of the bigger civilizations, like, the Roman Empire, the Babylonians, the Egyptian, etc. But if you actually look deeper into those time periods, there are many city-state empires, which would be the ancient equivalent of a micro-empire, that had such a huge influence, yet they were very small in geographical size.
Venice,
right?
Tricity, Genoa.
Exactly.
Yeah, this Mediterranean.
Yep. So see, you can already come up with many examples, So do give me your list because I'll end up putting it in the Micro Empires newsletter. because I love studying all of these different micro empires and then, connecting it to modern, micro empires and micro businesses. So then fast forward to today. What are the equivalent micro empires today that exist, maybe at a national level? So I think some of the examples that I have, which I'll be featuring in my upcoming book, Micro Empires Unleashed, is Singapore. So Singapore is another classic example of a micro empire. They are small in geographical size, but they command huge revenue and huge influence on the global stage. And a lot of people know them as the Switzerland of Asia, right? And so then that brings up Switzerland. So over in Europe, you also have places like Switzerland, which are very economically powerful, but very small in size again. And if you go over to the United States, you could even look at Silicon Valley. Now, Silicon Valley isn't its own country, right? It's just an area within the United States. But it is known, right, as Silicon Valley. People refer to Silicon Valley because it produces so many wealthy startups, right? Unicorn companies, etc. So these are examples of modern day micro empires because it has to do with the more traditional or classic definition with geographic size. But in modern times, when we're looking at businesses, it's a lot more digital. And we are now starting to see that there are these tech companies who are starting to have more power than nations themselves. And this is how power has kind of shifted and changed, because you can see that some of these companies even are able to influence politics, right? Because these CEOs of these tech companies become very powerful because they're able to operate at scale across the world, even though they might have only a couple thousand employees. Right? Compare that to nations where they have 5 million people, right? Say like in Singapore, it's a different case. So these micro empires of today is becoming more relevant because these smaller and smaller teams are now being able to compete with some of these larger, even tech companies, right? And they're able to move faster. They're able to do things differently because they're leveraging technology to get more out of, their time and their money. And so I think those are the kind of like three components when we're looking at micro empires. We've got like the ancient micro empires, we've got the modern micro empires, and then we've got these digital micro empires that is being enabled and accelerated through emerging tools and technologies like AI, etc.
I can bring another example now if we are speaking about micro empires, maybe not empires yet, but such entities. It's Liberland, if you heard about it. And I am actually a resident of Free Republic of Liberland. And I am following, and I am following other project of Free City Foundation, because Free City Foundation actually speaking about development new projects. It might be villages, it might be actually a network of villages. I'm not speaking about Balázs book, and Balázs theory, which I'm aware of as well. I'm more kind of leaning to the Free City Foundation approach of giving opportunities people, entrepreneurs, and actually for people who prefer to live in community of like-minded people, different option of living, say, Liberland in center of Europe, but even Liberland, which is saying that it will be Singapore of Europe, we will see. It's what their kind of program is. And they're leveraging technology. It's actually what this country is about. But they also speaking about spreading the concept and Switzerland administration system to other continents like North America, Latin America. Okay, so it's a really exciting time to live in. And now I understand that actually you're speaking about the same, but using different terms. And telling the truth, I'm not very excited of big corporation, these big Silicon Valley companies on influencing politics for millions of other people, but it's a different conversation. But I understand that it doesn't matter I like it or not, but the world is moving in this direction. But no, I mean, it should be check and balances. I mean, in everything. And with all these switches, it might be too much for many people, for millions of people, actually, for billions of people on the world. And as far as I understand, we are living in this transition stage of going kind of from previous kind of life setup, even it's different for different countries, to something new, which is based on the digital and technology. But what I'm kind of really cautious about, I even sometimes shared with my comments on your post that I don't want to lose our human side, our human history, our human touch, even our all what our civilization developed over the centuries, coming from different cultural background. I feel that it's super valuable. And actually, that's why one of the reasons I'm so interested in your work, because you're trying to bridge, as far as I understand, this technological digital aspect of development with community building and with historical heritage. And now I'm just thinking that my question would be, how has your own Polynesian heritage, and actually living in different countries, influenced your approach to technology and online community building, actually what you do now?
Great question. It's definitely influenced a lot, and I can thank my mother for that, because from very young, she was always stressing the importance of knowing your roots. And, obviously, as I guess, immigrants coming from the Pacific into Australia in the early days, my parents, they both had to work hard and make their way up. And, I got to benefit later on in life with, better opportunities, better education. But with the Polynesian side, my mom, even though we didn't get to learn the language, and that's another topic, because I think there was contention between my mom and dad on whether or not to teach us, their languages or just go straight for English. But she did make it.
I'm sorry, what languages do you speak? How many languages do you speak?
Only English. Only English.
Okay. Oh, in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Australia, I understand. So you were going only with English and it was enough?
I mean, I don't think it was enough, but I was able to get by with English in the Asia Pacific region, because most of the countries did speak English. But I think, looking back, I wish, my mom had taught me more, because she speaks, I think, about 5 languages. My dad, 2. But I think it was more my dad's desire for us to only speak English, because, and again, it depends on the families. But I think he felt that it would be better for us to just focus on English so that we could assimilate right into places like Australia. And I think you're familiar with this story, right? For a lot of different families, immigrant families, where sometimes the children, they'll know the other language, say English or Spanish, but they might not know their parents' language, and there's a disconnect, in culture. But my mom,
in my family, I insisted, even I'm not kind of ethnically Russian, but because Russian was my first language, and like all relatives which live in different countries now. So my children actually speaking Russian, but it's a lot of effort. No, speaking, reading, and writing, like they don't like it, but they know it. But again, back to you. I'm sorry. It's a very important question, because language is one of the bridges which connect us with our parents, grandparents, and actually the culture which is behind the language. So for me, language, it's not like, for example, I don't like what's like Russia is doing over the years. It's not my country, and never was my country, but it was my language, and I appreciate all the cultural background this language is opening for me. Your case is really interesting. So you, with English, managing to live in so many countries, but with all this, you came, or you coming, or you developing your connection with culture of your parents. Yes.
yes. And it's one of those things too, where sometimes, people like us, I think we're engaged more into things like community and culture, maybe because we didn't have, right? Or maybe because we felt there was a disconnect somewhere in our upbringing. So this is also, even though this has become part of my career, it's also a personal journey for me because it's forcing me to also learn more about my own culture. So in learning about all of these other cultures and respecting and appreciating all the different cultures, I'm also learning a lot for myself. And so in terms of how the culture has influenced, I guess my work, it's it's had a big impact because the community building aspect that you said was very natural for our culture. So in the South Pacific, it's very family oriented, it's very people oriented. There's things like island time. So when it comes to, being on time for meetings, right? That's just not something that is common. People will often come up late, and that's a cultural thing. But for me, I always got like kind of secondhand, I guess, explanations and experiences of our culture. And it's kind of interesting too, because if you think about like even Latin America, right? And you compare the Spanish in Latin America compared to Spanish back in Spain now, even though the Spaniards, right, they're the originators, right? But they have a different form of Spanish compared to all the Latin American countries. And sometimes the Spanish folks who have their Spanish heritage, sometimes they're more into their culture than the Spaniards back in Spain, because it's a part of their identity because they're so far away. And I think that's probably what has happened for me, because I was so far away, from my ancestral homelands. I've had to find ways to reconnect. And so I'm using the opportunities that I've been given, right? So from an education, business, all that sort of stuff, to kind of bring these benefits, but do something to help back home with the ancestral homelands, because I know my ancestors took those risks to leave to find better opportunities for their, families. I feel it's part of my responsibility to do something to give back. And that's kind of what drives me a lot.
So where your roots coming from? Like Tuvalu, Fiji? Like explain me, please.
All over. So this is why I say like the Pacific, the South Pacific region itself, it almost every island nation has a bit of my family. So the Tuvaluans, right? This is where my grandma and my great grandfather, right? They come from. But Tuvalu is also a mix of Tongan and Samoan. My mom, she was raised in Fiji, but she was raised with a Samoan father. So culturally, she's more Samoan than Tuvaluan. And then for me, am migrated to Australia with the family when I was young. I have an Australian citizenship, but culturally, I don't share anything with Australia because most of my formative years was formed when I was in Bangladesh.
But you're living already many years outside of Australia and Bangladesh, and you still feel that your kind of cultural influence more coming from Bangladesh side?
No, in terms of cultural influence from Bangladesh, I don't feel that there was a strong influence there. But my schooling, because I went to an international school, right? There was so many different cultures in that school. And I think that had more of an effect on me than maybe Bangladesh itself, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. And I've heard it actually from other third culture children who were educated in international schools, which in some sense it's a very good environment to catch and to interact with children from different culture, but it's kind of different comparing the situation when you live in society of the culture.
Correct.
Of the country you are now. And with I understand that the many stories can be told about each kind of period of your life, but tell me please what way actually you ended up with your role in the National Digital Ledger project with Tuvalu government, which really unusual project. And I'm interested to know how this project, if it's in progress at this point. And actually I understand it's what push you or what give you inspiration to think about creating digital nation, correct?
Yeah.
Please tell about this project and your role.
For sure. So I would say that like I'm a very intuitive, gut-driven person. A lot of my decisions that I make in life is often from, my gut, right? Because whenever I've not listened to my gut, things don't happen. So how that project came to be was it was New Year's Eve, and I was already working in the tech space and blockchain space for a while. And I saw this news about how Tuvalu was considering something new relating to a certain amount of funds was coming up. It was a renewal of their .com, their .tv domain, because a lot of people don't know that Tuvalu owns .tv. And so in a sort of a night of inspiration, it was New Year's Eve, I thought, hey, okay, if Tuvalu is going to have their .tv renewed and they're going to be getting some money coming in, why don't I put together a plan that will help, maybe maximize the incoming money at that point in time. And so I actually put together this document called the 5-point plan for a sinking nation, right, for Tuvalu. And this article, you can find it on Medium. If you just look up a 5-point plan, Tuvalu, my name, you should find the article. And then I just published it. And this article then made its way amongst the Tuvaluan community on Facebook. So many of the Tuvaluans, Facebook is still very popular there. So that article then made its way to some members of parliament or members in the government in Tuvalu. And then I ended up getting in touch with one of the ministers there, Simon Kofe. And so from there, we started having conversations about, what this would look like, how it could help Tuvalu, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of these ideas were complementary to maybe some of the things that Simon Kofe was thinking of, but maybe added more detail, to it. And because I've already been working in that space, this was sort of the way that I saw I could use my knowledge and experience to be able to set Tuvalu up for the future. Because I was thinking about way into the future, if Tuvalu did sink, what would they need to do in order to continue on as a people and a culture? And I think those aspects help plant the seeds for what is now known as the Future Now project. So I came in it from a very specific blockchain perspective, because that's kind of like my realm of expertise. And I think the Tuvalu government took elements of that and created the Future Now project, which is now in motion. Now, the Future Now project, there are some elements of blockchain, but they're looking at creating essentially a digital version, right, of Tuvalu, so that if something ever happened, they might be able to get legal backing to be continuously recognized as a nation, even if the physical land ceases to exist. And this is quite revolutionary, and I think it's quite smart of Tuvalu to do, because it might set a precedent for other parts of the world that might suffer to the effects of rising ocean levels, because many coastal cities or many low-lying islands are at risk of sinking if, ocean levels do continue to rise. But this is also something that has happened throughout history, right? Many lands have come up and sunk as well due to changes in climate. And I think we're just at a period or a point in time where we have to adapt. And I think technology can help us adapt to this. So the initiative that I started, the Tuvalu National Digital Ledger Project, we did phase 1 of that. It was to kind of, test the theory, test the idea out. But I think one of the things that, has been made clear is that this blockchain aspect might be a bit too ahead of its time. So in the process of doing this project, I noticed and observed that I think the world market still isn't ready for a lot of these innovations, even a nation like Tuvalu. Yeah, because there's quite a few things that need to shift, even culturally and sort of in mindsets, that has to do with digital infrastructure. And so places like Tuvalu, they have more basic needs where they're upgrading their internet, right? They're upgrading their telecommunications infrastructure. Those sort of things like matter a little bit more immediately. The blockchain stuff was always my sort of backup plan or insurance for Tuvalu, right? So I trust that there are other smart people to help out with things now, but I'm the type of person that I like to look a little bit ahead, right? So that, nations, communities, businesses, they're not blindsided by, these sort of disruptive new things that come into play. So for blockchain technology, I still think we have about 10 to 15 more years before we see sort of global adoption of the technology. The technology is there. It is technically ready, but human beings are a little bit slow to catch up. And if you look at how innovation works with technology, for example, the internet existed, I think, in the 60s or 70s already, right? But it took social media companies to come in around the 2010s to make it more accessible for normal users. Before then, right, in the early days of the internet, I think it was mostly governments or universities. Then it became accessible by maybe the companies that can afford, doing anything, right? And then we just started to have more and more people become aware of the internet. I remember there's a video that goes around about, I think it was on a news network where they were talking about emails and they didn't understand why is there an @ symbol and a .com, because everybody was using fax machines. And so there are all these other things that we use that we kind of have to get out of before we adopt new things. And you see this time and time again in human history that for some reason, it takes about 30 years for human beings as a collective to adopt a new innovation, because I think maybe where the technology is quick, but we're still a bit slow because we have all these cultural things and mindsets and beliefs that we have to get out of before we can adopt the new technology.
And the issue sometimes that we don't want to give up our cultural background for the good reason. For the good reason, we don't want to be kind of machine or fully, follow some protocol. Because I understand the difference. Like I belong to different generation. My relationship with kind of human life and human culture and with dignity. Well, now I'm serious, personal dignity as a human being with multiple capacities like of creation and, music and all this. I kind of looking to this digital intervention, say to some sacred places maybe of our psyche. At least I feel it this way. So you've been involved with both Coin Association and FIRE, yes, correctly pronouncing. And please explain what is the difference, first of all, and how do you navigate between intersection of cryptocurrency communities and actually adoption of broader technological advancement?
Yeah, sure. So my work with the Bitcoin Association was under contract. So I was brought in to help them optimize things for their community related to the association, and then also to help improve things internally related to their, workplace culture, operations, those sort of things, right? So with that, I've been involved with different Bitcoin communities and Bitcoin like associations over the last decade. And I've also been involved in helping other, cryptocurrency-based communities through my agency, FIRE. So FIRE, you pronounced it correctly, is essentially we describe it as a community tech consulting agency. And the community tech, because that's my intersection or my passion, right, with community and technology. And I agree with you, people do matter. We should never forget that. But we also shouldn't be afraid of the technology, right? That we should make sure that if we have it and use it, it serves us and not the other way around. So that is the community tech side. The consulting, because primarily we give a lot of advice and consulting services. And then the agency is second because for companies and clients who maybe want more than just the strategy and the playbooks, et cetera, then we can actually service them by helping them to execute on some of those projects. But essentially, FIRE in Samoan, the word is originally Samoan, so I found out about it, through my mom and through my network. And apparently it means to span a divide like a bridge. And I think this works as a great concept for us as a company, because what we want to be is a bridge between communities and technology. This is also reflected in my own personal journey in terms of always being kind of at the edge of different cultures and communities, and being a bit of a translator between the different cultures and communities. And when I started working professionally, I found myself doing the same thing, but in a professional context. So I have a background as a developer. So when I first started, I actually wanted to be an animator, and I learned everything around computer technology, which included programming. And so my first job actually was as a front-end developer. And that has helped me, though, navigate the tech space because I have a foundation in the way that, technology works. But as a result, I learned that I had better skills with people. So with some of the companies I worked with, all of my developer friends would often get me to talk to clients. because they didn't want to speak to people. They just wanted to code. So I would often be the one to explain complex technical topics to people who are non-technical, and then also vice versa. And so this has really been the crux of my career journey, is just being a translator of technical complex things to non-technical people or groups. And so
layperson.
exactly the lay.
Yeah, like I belong to the same camp. Like I'm not shy to tell it. I mean, in this particular area, because I even don't have time to follow all advancement. Obviously, I know about Web3. I know about different meta communities. By the way, Liberland, they're developing them meta community, and I'm just wondering like what kind of communities and what's the difference between them? Like when you say community, again, meta community, where your people are, or where the people of certain communities and how they communicate, just through the metaverse?
It depends. Metaverse also as a term is kind of died down a bit, right? I would say between 2020 and 2022, that's when it was it was a really big buzzword, right? Now the flavor of the month or the year is AI. But during the metaverse period, these communities, interestingly enough, were not all inside the metaverse, right? And if we look at what the metaverse was, it's really just like video games. Because if I go back to the early 2000s, there were games that looked very similar to these metaverse applications. And just 20 years later, what they were doing, the only difference for these metaverse communities was that they were attaching cryptocurrencies as a form of currency, right? To engage between the online world and offline. That's where cryptocurrency started to come in. Now, cryptocurrencies has also got a bad reputation because of all the scams that have come out of it, right? There are a lot of people who realize, oh, I can just essentially create my own money by creating a new cryptocurrency. I will go just, scam a whole bunch of people into believing that this is the next big thing. They give me their real money, right? Real money. And then I cash out, and then they have their digital, NFT or whatnot, but they can't do anything with it. So this is also why I say there's about 10 to 15 more years for some of these technologies to really make things useful for us. And that's because we still live in a world that is, 2.0, right? That's the term that they call Web 2.0. And so we have to transition out of Web 2.0 into Web 3.0. But all of these other emerging technologies like AI, spatial computing, all of these things need to become commonplace before we can really take advantage of these technologies that, were hot for a minute, but have also died out just as quickly. And so when I'm talking about communities, obviously communities, everybody knows what a community is. Often it's just a group of people with shared beliefs, values, and ideas or vision. Yeah. But in the online world, there are nuances, and all of those nuances has to do with what type of community they are and who they serve. So a meta community is a metaverse-based community, but when I was working in that space, those communities were often in Discord or Slack, or still they were in Web 2.0 forums for community communications. That may change now because of, the hardware is catching up. So Apple just released Vision Pro, right? New hardware technology that may enable us to interact more with that metaverse experience that Mark Zuckerberg was, wanting to see. But these communities, I often tell people, like, don't get too caught up in the fancy names for communities. Just look at who are they serving, and essentially that community is serving that niche. That's generally how I look at it.
So how these communities actually, how they different from the forums, which we have already online, number of forums and even known kind of forums where people going to find and select like-minded people or to find some information. And what will be with other people who are not kind of part of meta community?
So it's, to use more traditional terms, neighborhoods, right? I think many of us in the pre-internet era, communities had to do with your local neighborhood, suburb, village, right? Those type of communities. And I think in the online world, they just take a different form. And so all of these different platforms and forums, they are just online versions of these neighborhoods, right? And so you're just choosing the neighborhood that you want to go to. And in the metaverse, again, it's a new type of neighborhood. Maybe it's just a more futuristic looking neighborhood, but it's still a neighborhood. And so the technology is just creating a different experience of that neighborhood. And that's where the community is congregating. Like that's where they're coming together. But the community, the ways that communities come together is still kind of the same, but the location is different. So instead of the physical world, we're obviously going into the digital world, right? And Web 2.0, where we would come together would be, Slack, Discord, Twitter, Facebook. Those were the places that we would go for community. With the metaverse, it's just taking it up another level, but it's just a different environment. Now it's like you can put on your goggles and you can kind of see and feel everybody, but you're still coming together in a virtual platform or a virtual neighborhood.
Now I'm serious. Why digital or virtual reality is better than our physical reality? Like our physical interaction as a people in the world, all what, again, ancient civilization till now were developing in different form and shapes. And like, I'm personally not excited. I understand it's not about me, that digital reality will kind of oversee over our actually all beautiful world we have around us. So why do I need goggles to live in some imaginary world when obviously I cannot travel, now to be in Tuvalu, and I have TV for this purpose. I mean, to see how people living here and there. And I understand as a traveler, I very appreciate opportunity actually to travel to this place, but actually feel and see and touch with my physical, and feelings. So why the higher level, in your opinion, like this Web.3, it's a higher level of existence versus to a human being as we are developed, so far?
Yeah, I don't know if it's better. I think it's just where the technology is taking us. And I think there are obviously advantages and disadvantages. And this has happened every time humanity has scaled, right? So if you think about a village, right? So you have your village and it's, a limited location, yeah? Then eventually there's so many people in that location and people want more space. So it pushes them out more and more. And it pushes, eventually over time, it pushes it out until there's no more land left, right? And people will start forcing themselves to travel the oceans. And people who are used to living on land say, why do you want to go travel the oceans, right? Why do you want to go explore new territory, right? Stay here on land, it's much better. And that's because I think there are always people who will explore to find new ways of doing things, to find new resources, right?
I absolutely understand. I understand where you're going. I always cherished, Columbus and Vasco da Gama and all people who were discovering new land. Or maybe at the time it was like new universe, like it's a different planet, but it was still human endeavor and discovery of potential. And now we are speaking about a different being, as far as I understand. And okay, I didn't want to use the word singularity, but it's not what in my opinion, will enrich human interaction or actually human being. So in my opinion, okay, my question, how people will benefit rather than having, AI doing some work in mundane or, not interesting or really speeding up work, like AI tools, I understand, as they will help people. But this quick development, and you speak in 10 years, like what do you see in 10 years will be with us, and how we as a human being will actually benefit from it? I'm not speaking about Silicon Valley, chairperson and, leaders of the companies, even speaking about micropreneur, how small micropreneur in his life and his family life will be better in 10 years rather than now.
Well, I'll give you a very easy example, right? for my ancestors, in order to get better opportunities, right, better money, they had to leave their home in order to do that. Okay. With these new technologies, you do not have to leave your home. You do not have to give up your culture, your traditions in order to make money, right? In a very practical term, right? This type of technology and this access allows people who don't want to physically leave their homes in order to find better opportunities to do that from the comfort of their own homes, villages, islands, right? They have the same access that previously only people who had money to travel elsewhere could have access to.
How they will get more
Is that a good
opportunities?
example?
No, I understand it's very interesting point, but how actually they will get more opportunities? Yes, they can meet other people, like we're speaking with you now, being in different parts of the continent or even in different continents. But speaking about the business opportunities, because it's not only communication, which obviously is better now when with the technology, but what opportunities are you speaking about?
Well, I mean, there's so many online opportunities. If you just go to YouTube, right, there's so many ways to make money. I think most people these days don't realize just how much knowledge exists online for free for you to be able to make money. And previously, you would have to go to, special business school or again, travel to another country in order to get access to that knowledge to make your money. But today, to create an online business, it does not take much. But you still have to go through the same things that any entrepreneur has to go through to learn how to make money, right? Whether it's online or offline, right? You will still have hard days as a business owner, right? The only difference is their medium.
Yeah, but we are speaking about internet point two, like version 2.
Yep.
It's YouTube, it's what we have now.
Yep.
My question is how version 3 will be better and how we will benefit from the next 10 years version.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, it's to me, I don't know if better is the right word. It's just different. It's just an evolutionary step, right? Because I think people think that we're forced into a lot of these evolutions with technology, but you can always choose not to engage with it, right? And I think some people don't like it when things change and it makes it more difficult. But I think it's important for people to know that you always have a choice whether to use the things or not. So it's like, if you want to use the new technologies, you learn about it and figure out ways to make it benefit you. If you don't, then you just stick to what you know and you try to make your living that way. It's always a trade-off. But of course, the world will still move on or continue on doing its thing. But there are many examples of people who still do like traditional jobs, traditional things, and they make their money that way. Like in Australia, if you work as a manual laborer, right? Like say you work out in construction or as a tradie, you can still make more money than somebody who's operating a digital business. It's just different opportunities and different utilization of those skill sets. Because it's not a guarantee that when you have new technology, that automatically everybody's going to make more money or be better off. It still comes back to you and what you do with it. And it's always been that way. So it's just presenting, it's not better. I see it as it's just a new opportunity with new technologies, and it's up to you whether you want to use it or not. Because there are still many people who make their wealth through real estate, right? And I think they will continue to make money through real estate, right? And they make more money than some of the online entrepreneurs who struggle to make anything online, even with all this knowledge and even with Web 2.0. So, and I think it's going to be the same way in Web 3.0, that even though there's all these cool new technologies, I don't think it's going to be for everybody, right? And I think there'll still be some of us who might make more money in the old way than some people with the access to the new way. Does that make sense?
Now I understand.
Yeah.
From the practical perspective of new generation to making money and actually finding their own niche.
Yes.
And developing this niche to the extent that it will be, yes, different reality for them.
Correct.
Obviously, we cannot and shouldn't speak now about all aspects of something that it's not tangible efforts,
Yeah.
and it's still in development.
Yep.
So one more question. Yes, on the personal note, you talk a lot about your journey to explore ancient cultures. How does this particular adventure feed into your professional endeavors? And actually, I believe from this one, you get the idea of developing communities. How do you see bridge, as you already playing role sometimes between ancient cultures and communities to the communities of new type?
Yep, good question. I think for me, because my mom did a good job of remembering our roots and, always ensuring to remember where we came from, that got me fascinated in learning more about ancient history. And what I realize is that when you look into the past, you find patterns and cycles, right? You notice and observe things that happen again and again, but they happen in different ways. So it's like there's an overarching same type of cycle, but it just happens in a different time period or in a different way. And so I started to learn to just look at those cycles and look at like how can how can these particular rituals or these behaviors from ancient times, how can they be used for us today so that we're not necessarily repeating the same mistakes? I think it's inevitable because every time, I guess we have a new person born, we're all learning different things in different ways. And not all of us are able to just read all of the history from the past. And as we know, even with history, it's not always a full picture. There's things that are missing. There's debates on what's true, what's not. So who knows, right? But I think we can start to appreciate some of the things that more ancient cultures, communities, and civilizations have done that has stood the test of time, regardless of the changes in technology or society. And I think those are the important things that I appreciate and value. I personally always love speaking with like the elderly because I always love hearing the stories. It's the stories and the experiences that they've had that I think the younger generation need to hear so that we can also be a bit wiser. Because as younger generations are always going to think that they know better. I mean, I was that way, and as I get older, I realize, okay, yeah, I didn't know, but I thought I knew. And it's important that we share the stories. So at least, the older generation can know that they at least shared it with somebody. And that then it's up to the younger generation to do something with it. Right. And that's why I feel so compelled to do something with the opportunities I've been given to help, more of my ancestral homelands again in the Pacific because of all the risks that my ancestors took in order to have a better life. And again, I don't think any of us ever get it perfect. I don't know what's perfect, but I think we all have a desire to do better than, our parents or our grandparents. And it's that pursuit that often, is helpful, or at least I hope it's helpful.
Okay, one more question on the similar note. You live already for a couple of years in Mexico.
Yep.
And Mexico is known place for several ancient civilizations, actually. I don't know, if you've had chance, I believe, knowing you, that you already kind of discovered and looking close to them. How do you feel this civilization are really adding up value for you in your, pursuit of happiness and actually to society? Now we speak about Mexico or maybe wider society, because yes, there are some, travel. We have tours to these places, and the government trying to preserve them to the next generation. There is storytelling, there is tradition. There are actually like Maya people. If we speak about Mexico, there is no exactly, Aztec, Olmec, and there is remnants of these cultures. But how do you feel these stories really actually impact your life today?
Yeah, I think it's always fascinating to me to see all of their structures, right? And the pyramids and what they built so long ago. I think, like when we look at the Egyptian pyramids, even archaeologists today can't understand how they built it, and that amazes me with all of our technology, right? We think we're so advanced, yet we still can't explain some of these things from the past. And that's also why I explained, right, between Web 2 and Web 3, right? It's not necessarily better, it's just an evolution. But if it's going to be better, it's up to us with what we do with it, And I think we can see the same thing with how scientists of today still cannot explain some of these ancient things, right? And so that excites me, because it means that no matter how much we learn, there's always going to be more, and that we don't know everything. And for the Mayans and the Toltecs and the Olmecs here in Mexico, I think what they've helped do for me is maybe appreciate more our interconnectedness as human beings, because I noticed that there are a lot of things in their culture that is actually similar to Polynesian culture. And I think that's where it made me curious to learn more about myself, even though I was exploring their culture. And I think that's part of why I love history and culture, and especially ancient history and culture, is that the more that I look into the past, the more I learn to appreciate today and also project into the future. Because again, no matter how much we come to know now, there may be people in the future who might not even understand how we build things today, you know, because there are just cycles that happen. So I think, yeah, for me, it's the interconnectedness of us as human beings. So when people ask where I'm from, of course, I give the answer about, this nation, that culture, but I am human first and foremost. And I do try to optimize for that, even though I'm in the technology space. The human aspect is very important. And I think the technology, we need to learn how to have that serve us instead of overtake us. If that happens, it may happen. I don't know if that's inevitable. We've seen all of those doom and gloom movies, but I hope not. I hope we can learn how to live with technology harmoniously. And maybe that has to come from us learning how to live with nature harmoniously, because in the physical world, we have lost touch with nature.
It was exactly my point. We kind of lost our connection with nature, like in general, some people not.
Yep.
And many people who are now developing, Web3 technologies would not be able to survive for 2 days in a jungle, probably. No, for the reason. So that's why I'm kind of question the benefits, but not still visible to me, like how to make our life not just better, which can be subjective, but more make us more connected, more sensitive to needs of each other, and actually to help society to look forward to the future with hope. Because again, thinking as you were speaking about ancient pyramids in Egypt or even in Mexico. And I was thinking, like, I've had education as construction engineer, and today some bridges or buildings collapsing after 20 years. So all this technology, and they were built based on kind of advanced technologies 20 years ago. So what will be after us, like at least this civilization, they left not only structure like calendar and advanced mathematics, like, yes, here it will be something to live as well. But probably we need another conversation, George, for developing the topics of new forms of life, which developing as we are speaking. So as for today, I'm very grateful for opportunity to speak with you. And I believe and I hope that your life and interaction with Mexican people around bring you joy and maybe new understanding of interconnection between people. I'm not sure if you have time to learn Spanish.
Oh, I am. Yes, I am learning at the moment.
Okay,
Aprendiendo.
great. So it will be your second language.
Yep.
Finally. No, and I'm very happy, and like I hope to meet you in real life. Even there is nice opportunity to connect with you online. And all the best to you, to your projects, to your aspirations, to your vision, to your existing and probably new projects to be, and to your communities. Like, I just wish that the life of the people around you will be enriched and better, as well as you will fly in your imagination and creativity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There are many reasons people choose to make the move to the destination of their dreams. Remote workers can work from anywhere with an internet connection. Today, virtually every part of the world is online. Once just the lifestyle of digital nomads, the pandemic has led millions of people to work remotely. Many are choosing to move to a foreign location. Retirees, too, discover how their nest egg can go farther when living in a location that offers a better quality of life while reducing expenses. At International Lifestyle Consultants, we have scoured the world to uncover the best foreign destinations to call home. Perhaps you dream of a pastoral life in the quaint European countrysides of Italy or Portugal. On the shores of the Black Sea, you can find luxury accommodations at a fraction of what you would pay in the United States and Canada. Enjoy a leisurely lifestyle of Caribbean or Pacific trade winds found in the beachside communities of Mexico, Central and South America. Choose from the many charming colonial towns located in the same region. Discover areas with quality access to dental and health care that have attracted many foreign travelers on a budget. We make choosing to live in your dream destination a reality. We have curated migratory, cultural, and investment opportunities that you will not find elsewhere. We know firsthand how to help you create your step-by-step relocation plan. You'll begin your journey by filling out our Know Yourself questionnaire. We can also arrange discovery tours so you can experience the culture up close and personal prior to making your move. You don't have to dream of living in an exotic location. Contact us today and make that dream a reality.